For 95 years, Fossil Creek kept 1.5 gallons of water a second. Its springs produced 322. The rest went down a flume to 2 power plants. Less than half of 1% stayed in the canyon. On the 18th of June, 2005, Arizona Public Service switched both plants off and gave the creek all of it back. And nobody framed this as a triumph at the time. It was a utility closing 2 tiny, obsolete power stations and walking away from a relicancing bill. The expectation was a modest ecological improvement over a decade or two. Within months, hundreds of new stone dams began rising out of the stream bed on their own. Why would a power company in a state desperate for electricity switch off 2 working plants to let water run? Here is the arithmetic that made it possible. If you are learning something new here, subscribe. Comeback Atlas is just getting started. Stakes. What was actually lost here? Start in 1909 because that is when the taking began. Crews hauled the pieces of 2 hydroelectric plants into a canyon in central Arizona on mule trains and built a conveyance to move Fossil Creek's water to the turbines, not a wooden trough out of a western. Concrete and steel, a 7-mile series of flumes and tunnels and siphons, more than 10 miles of conduit in total, cut into the walls of the canyon. It worked. Childs and Irving powered Phoenix in the years when Phoenix was becoming a city. That is a real thing to have built. And the men who built it were not villains. But here is what it cost. Fossil springs pour out of the rock at a constant 70 degrees year-round, drought or no drought. 322 gallons every second. The diversion took essentially all of it. What was left below the dam was about 1.5 gallons a second, 9 garden hoses in a canyon that should have carried the equivalent of 2,000. And this is where Fossil Creek stops being an ordinary dewatered river. That water is saturated with dissolved calcium carbonate, and when it moves and aerates, the mineral falls out of solution and hardens into travertine, solid rock. At full flow, the creek lays down about 13 short tons of new stone every day, which is roughly the weight of a loaded city bus, precipitating out of the water every 24 hours. Under the diversion, scientists measured deposition below the dam at 46 kilograms a day. The creek was building rock at about 1/260th of its natural rate. The canyon was not just dry, it had stopped making itself. This is one of the largest travertine systems in the United States, and the stone terraces in it were not built by anyone. They are the creek's own work, laid down over thousands of years. Below the diversion that work stopped, and what was left was a line of still pools between bare rock. For the Yavapai Apache Nation, the loss was not geological. Their chairman, Vincent Randall, later described Fossil Creek as a sacred part of their traditional landscape. And for the people who spent the 90s trying to get the water back, the feeling was closer to fury. Robin Silver, who co-founded the Center for Biological Diversity, put it in one line. "It is amazing," he said, "that there aren't bullet holes in the flume. 95 years, 8 employees on skeleton crews, running a canyon dry. Is there a river near you that runs low because something upstream is taking it? And did you ever find out what that something actually produces?" The work. What happened when they opened it? They already knew. That is the part almost nobody tells you. In 1996, Arizona Public Service shut the turbines down for maintenance and let the full flow run back down the creek for a short window. Researchers sampling the creek during that window recorded travertine deposition on the order of 8 to 12 inches in a single month. Not over years, in a month. So when the decision came, 9 years later, The utility and the scientists both understood exactly what was about to happen. On the 18th of June, 2005, the water went back. Within months, hundreds of nascent travertine dams emerged from the channel bed along a stretch running more than 6 miles below the old diversion. Not built, grown. The creek began reassembling its own staircase of pools the way it had before anyone arrived, laying down rock at a rate you could measure between visits. By September, 3 months in, biologists surveying the creek found no non-native fish at all, and 5 native species present as young of year alongside the adults. The fish had not merely survived the return of the water. They had already spawned in it. The physical dismantling came later, and the sequence matters because people constantly merge it. 2005 was the flow. 2008 was the year the diversion dam itself was physically removed, along with the flume and the roads. 2009 was the year Congress protected the creek as a national wild and scenic river. The megawatt question. Here's the objection, and it deserves a serious answer because a director of the utility raised it himself. Ed Fox, who had previously run Arizona's Department of Environmental Quality, said plainly that when the plants closed, that was more electricity Arizona would have to generate from coal or from Palo Verde instead. In a desert state with soaring demand, throwing away working zero carbon generation for the sake of some minnows sounds indefensible. So how much power are we actually talking about? Childs and Irving together produced 4.2 megawatts. That is 0.1% of the electricity Arizona Public Service supplied. In modern terms, both plants combined were roughly 1 wind turbine. The numbers that made the decision. 4.2 megawatts against the Palo Verde nuclear station up the road at around 4,000. Childs and Irving together were about 1,000th of a single Arizona power plant. The money is even starker. Both stations together turned a profit of roughly $500,000 a year, which was about 0.02% of what the utility earned. And against that, relicensing meant rebuilding century-old infrastructure in a canyon. Walking away instead cost the company somewhere around $13 million. Jack Davis, then president and chief executive of Arizona Public Service, framed the choice this way. The company reviewed its business goals, he said, and determined that closing the power plants, returning the stream to its full flow, and recreating the natural condition of the area was simply the right decision. Our decision, he said, was based on what was best for Arizona. Now, the other side of the ledger, 43 cubic feet per second came back. That is about 20,000 gallons a minute, 8 full bathtubs every second, permanently, at a constant 70 degrees, around 29 million gallons a day, or roughly 44 Olympic swimming pools, and 13 short tons of new rock a day in a canyon that had been making 46 kilograms. The expansion. Watch it compound. 2004, crews remove the non-native fish. June 2005, the water returns. Within months, hundreds of travertine dams. 3 months in, 5 native species spawning. 2007 through 2010, biologists add spike dace, loach minnow, Gila top minnow, and razorback sucker behind a barrier about 4.5 miles up from the Verde River. 2008, the diversion dam comes out. 2009, Congress designates roughly 17 miles of Fossil Creek as wild and scenic. And then the number nobody planned for. People came. So many people that the Forest Service eventually had to build a permit system and cap access because a creek that almost nobody could find in 1999 had become a place you needed a reservation to visit. One more piece of context. This was only the second dam in American history taken out purely for environmental reasons. after Edwards Dam in Maine in 1999. And unlike Edwards, the fish saved here had no commercial value at all. Nobody eats a loach minnow. What Fossil Creek teaches us. The honest problem first. Fossil Creek is being loved to death. The restoration worked so completely that the canyon became one of the most sought-after swimming destinations in Arizona, and the crowds, the trash, and the parking brought their own damage. The permit system exists because the comeback outran the place's ability to absorb visitors. That is a better problem than a dry canyon. It is still a problem, and the decision was not pure philanthropy, whatever it looked like afterward. The Center for Biological Diversity had filed notice of intent to sue under federal environmental law. Relicensing rules had changed so that regulators were newly required to weigh environmental harm and not only economics. No court ordered this, but the company was not choosing between generosity and nothing. It was choosing between a lawsuit, a rebuild, and a graceful exit, which is the actual lesson, and it is more useful than a story about a corporation finding its conscience. The cheapest water Arizona ever bought was the electricity it agreed to stop making. Which part surprised you most? That both plants together were worth one wind turbine? That the creek makes a busload of new stone every day? Or that they already knew 9 years early? Tell me in the comments and subscribe to Comeback Atlas.